Thank you, Jean-Marc. So I'm going to spend a bit of time doing a survey about compiling encrypted data. Why? Because very recently a lot of interesting progresses have been published and a lot of code has emerged. So just a few words about me. I am an old guy, doing a PhD in crypto a long time ago. Approximately at the time when the AES standard was designed, a bit after. Then I worked a bit for the pay TV industry as a cryptographer. Then I taught applied crypto and other security related matter to students around here, which probably explains why so many people hate me in the room. But it's okay. During that way, I also got interested in software protection. So not only cryptography, but how to protect your code from reverse engineering. I am a has-been startup co-founder. And today I'm working as a cryptographer, as an applied cryptographer for a large social network, here in Yverdon. So here is the outline of my talks. First of all, I would like to motivate that talk. So why did I propose such a subject? Then we are going to speak a bit about homomorphic encryption. So that's a lot of strong words, but don't be too afraid. I have tried to remove as many questions as possible. Then we are going to speak about fully homomorphic encryption, which is the advanced or more capable version of homomorphic encryption. I will speak a bit about multi-party computation and then just show you a bit of application of MPC, meaning private set intersection, which is one of the MPC protocol that is currently deployed today or has been deployed by certain companies, namely Google. And then I will conclude. So a bit of motivation. Computing on encrypted data is strongly related with the cloud. Basically, most companies have confidential data or privacy-related data, like prior user data, and today those companies just use a lot of cloud capabilities for at least a non-negligible share of them. And it's sometimes, and having confidential data in the cloud triggers a lot of difficulties. So either you don't want to put your confidential data to a cloud provider that you might not completely trust, or even you are not allowed by regulators to do that. You can think about medical data, confidential business data, or private data. And so basically you could imagine just encrypting them and putting them, pushing them into the cloud. But at a certain point of time, you have to decrypt to have them in clear, to do useful stuff with them. Basically, if you would like to encrypt data, then it's a bit of a chicken and eggs problem, because you have to deal with the secret keys that encrypt them, and it becomes an even worse security nightmare. So I will just review a few possibilities to deal with that, like hard coding secrets in software, and maybe rely on hardware capabilities, which is good on paper, but not that easy to use in the cloud, because cloud providers does not offer that as of today. Use software protection techniques, but still it's not a complete solution. Or maybe use advanced cryptography, because cryptography is a discipline that is used to save the world. So my question is, can we use some kind of advanced, very sexy cryptography to keep confidential data in the cloud and still doing something useful with them? Just to come back, you can hardcode secrets. So you can think about encrypting your data and hardcode secrets, decrypt, allowing to have access to that encrypted data into source code, but usually and hoping to decrypt them just processing them and re-encrypt them or restoring them in a secure way. Unfortunately, it's not a very good idea because an experienced reverse engineer will just uncover the key or the key material or the encryption algorithm or the clear data in RAM in a matter of seconds, if not or of minutes, if not seconds. Sometimes you can ask the user for a secret. Most of the time not, but it's not a good idea as well because you will get low entropy secrets. You can try to mitigate that using some password-based key exchange or some kind of advanced protocol involving interaction, but to derive more secure key. But still, this does not solve the clear data in RAM. At a certain point, you will have your data in clear. And sometimes you don't even have a secret you can rely on. You can think about code authenticating itself to a backend, encrypting, decrypting data in a local storage, or even subcontracting computation to an untrusted actor. So hard coding cryptographic keys in software is not a good idea. Then you could say, okay, but now CPUs offer that hardware security, hardware capabilities. For instance, you can think about Intel SGX, ARM TrustZone, or the Secure Enclave on that is basically a Secure Enclave by Apple on Apple ecosystems. But still, which would allow to keep your data within a kind of hardware secured computing environment. So it would be more difficult to steal data out of that stuff. So it is a possibility to do that, but still as of today, traditional cloud provider do not offer access to the SGX instruction, for instance. And basically, you still have to trust your cloud provider in a way that I offer you SGX instruction, but I have to be sure that it's real SGX, real access to the CPU, and not something that looks like SGX and that might be virtualized or I don't know. And you have to trust the CPU, so the implementation of the SGX, so the Intel or AMD probably. Still, this is quite useful. This model is quite useful for ecosystem where the entire chain of security is mastered by a single owner, like for instance Apple, because Apple masters the hardware, so master the operating systems, and basically it masters all the chain. So you could imagine that this might be more useful to keep data confidential. Of course, you have to be very careful by having safe implementations, and bugs can still open. So hardware capabilities to protect your data is a good solution, but it's still not a perfect solution. You could imagine using software protection techniques like code obfuscation, tamper proofing, but as everybody knows, it's just a matter to slow down adversaries, even if you encode your confidential data. So I'm not saying encrypting, but encoding your confidential data using a kind of secret encoding that is obfuscated into the code. A new time, this will slow down your adversary, but never stop him. Some approaches have been worked a bit more seriously to embed secret keys into algorithm implementation themselves. So basically the keys become, or the code become the key, but still we still don't know today how to do this in a real secure way. It's, I would say, slightly more secure, but this does not offer you cryptographic guarantees, so in the good sense of the word. So, just a first summary. If you would like to secure your confidential to the cloud, basically you can hardcode your secrets in your source code, so you don't have to trust anybody. But the problem is that you don't have any security. good point is that the performance is good because there is no CPU time invested into security. You can use software protection techniques, but in that case, you have to trust your mad cryptographer, which is not always a good idea. Performances are not that good because it comes with an associated cost, and the security, okay, it's okay, but still not far from being optimal. You can use hardware-based security. In that case, your trust issues are somewhat mitigated. Performances, depending on the data, could be a problem, or it could be acceptable if you just do some kind of cryptographic computation. And the security is still a bit debatable because you have to trust your CPU vendor. So, question: can we do better and use some advanced crypto? And the idea is very simple, but it has been a very long time to put it in practice. The idea is just to keep your secrets in a cryptographic secrets in a safe location, encrypt the data, send the ciphertext to the cloud, and work on the ciphertext. So make the cloud work on the ciphertext so that no information leaks out of those ciphertext, and then get the result encrypted so that you can decrypt and get the result. In that case, you don't need to trust the cloud environment. You don't need to trust the CPU makers, etc. So in other words, you just would like to compute on encrypted data. And actually, it's a very old research area because the first work, academic work in that domain, date back to the 80s. But for a very, very long time, multi-party computation, for instance, was more of a theoretical nature. So when I was a young PhD student, we were going into conferences. The MPC session was really for theoreticians because for them, efficient just mean polynomial time, and they had no clue about implementing anything. So yeah, it was really stuff for mathematician, theoretical guys. But it was 30 years ago. And in exactly 10 years ago, there was a scientific breakthrough, which is the first plausible, fully homomorphic encryption scheme that has been designed by Craig Gentry. He was working for IBM at that time. And actually, today, a lot of water just went under the bridge, and a few advanced protocols have been implemented. Even some of them have been put in production very recently, which motivates a survey. So the goal of this talk is really to keep as high level as possible, to present you different paradigms, typically fully homomorphic encryption versus multi-party computations, to discuss a bit their trust settings, and to present certain of its instances, like your private set intersection. Yeah, it's really to provide a big picture of today's state of affairs. It's not my goal to explain you all the related maths, because most of them I don't understand them, to be honest, to discuss the internal workings of the algorithms. So, homomorphic encryption. Here is a very simple scenario. Let's admit that you had a lot of point of sales into the nature, and you are the big boss. Do you have a laser? Yes, here the big boss. And every day you would like to push the amount of money that has been entered into the point of sale to the cloud, to compute a sum, and to get the aggregated sum of all the turnovers of your millions of point of sales. So, of course, your server is implemented into the cloud. So the first question that you can ask yourself, how can I secure that? Because I don't want to disclose my turnover to anybody, including to the cloud provider. So the first solution, if you just consider bad guys between the point of sales and the cloud here, so I just put two bad guys here, would just consist in using a secure channel to communicate with the cloud, like your TLS channel. But it means that cryptographically speaking, that you will set up and share a key between the point of sales and the cloud, and between and the same for that communication channel here, where you need a secret that is shared between the cloud and the boss. The issue, of course, is that the secret data, so that those amounts of money here, will be decrypted into the cloud, kept in clear somewhere into the RAM of any compute instance, added together, re-encrypted and transmitted to the boss. Of course, this raises the question: what can I do to protect against somebody having compromised my cloud instance, or even the cloud provider? And basically, you can solve this issue, at least in terms of confidentiality, using homomorphic encryption. So, for instance, like the PAIE crypto system. So I won't give the detail on how is working the PAIE crypto system, but the PAIE crypto system is homomorphic. What does that mean? It means that if you encrypt a first message, I've cheated here because there is some randomness involved, so this is a randomized operation, but still, I encrypt a first message, I encrypt a second message, and then I multiply using some kind of fancy multiplication together, modular multiplication, the two ciphertexts together. What I'm going to get is the encryption of the sum of the messages. So it means that here you can just plug your amount of money encoded on a 32-bit integer, encrypt it, doing the same with the other and with the other and with the other, and then get the sum of your two numbers in an homomorphic stuff. What you can do also is to have a multiplication, but of a public data. Basically, you can raise your ciphertext to some kind of public constant and get that constant multiplied by the public and to decrypt it at the end. But what you cannot do is to multiply using secret data. So this is PAIE, and PAIE basically can be found in many more advanced cryptographic schemes, like eCache, or more recently in e-voting schemes, where you will have to do some kind of addition on ciphertext to compute votes, for instance. You can find PAIE crypto system in threshold cryptography, like threshold signature schemes and so on. Still, you cannot do whatever you want using the PAIE crypto system. So this is where fully homomorphic encryption arrives as a scheme. So let's have a second scenario. We are going to do something a bit more involved in terms of mathematical terms. Let's assume that Alice has a portfolio with different shares, different amount of shares or stock shares, and she would like to compute the associated risk. To compute the associated risk, she has implemented an algorithm based on logistic regression. That sounds very cool. It's machine learning. No, not that advanced machine learning, but it's very basic machine learning stuff. And she would like to outsource the risk computation of this logistic regression to her preferred cloud provider. Of course, without revealing her portfolio structure, and without revealing the coefficient of her logistic regression model. So here's how you can model that mathematically. You can so a logistic regression is just a kind of linear combination between an amount of share and a coefficient here, and basically what you are going to compute is this linear equation here and get a value that will just say you hot dog or not hot dog, or more risky, not risky. So give you a kind of binary decision. This is how works a logistic regression. But in that case, you just have additions here. You have multiplication here, but all the involved numbers are supposed to be kept confidential. So what you do here, if you just use a homomorphic encryption, basically you will be able to have schemes allowing to do additions securely, or schemes doing multiplication securely, but you don't have schemes that do both at the same time. And here you really need some new crypto magic, and this is called a fully homomorphic encryption. And it has been a long time until somebody was able to come up with a scheme. So it was really a theoretical breakthrough by Craig Gentry in 2009. This is a kind of cool PhD thesis that one of the coolest PhD theses you can imagine having. Just the PhD thesis has been cited more than 2,000 times today. The paper 5,000 times. So this is a huge scientific achievement. And basically, you could imagine having schemes computing either multiplication and addition modulo 2, so XOR gates and AND gates, or you could imagine having some schemes allowing to do addition and multiplication in a what we call in an algebraic ring, meaning a kind of mathematical structure where you will be able to add and multiply basically without any problem. So just have a look at the API, high-level API. So you are going to have a key generation procedure that will just take a security parameter. The nightmare begins here because it's already a very difficult, complicated mathematical problem to estimate the size of the keys of the ciphertext depending on the security parameter. It's already a whole research area in itself. So you take a security parameter and you return a public key, a decryption key, so a private key like RSA, for instance. But in addition, you also get a public evaluation key that will allow you to work on the ciphertext. And basically, we'll be able to encrypt your data. You would just take the public key, a plain text, and get a ciphertext in return. You will be able to decrypt that converse operation, and you have a kind of eval procedure that will take the evaluation key, one or more ciphertexts, and a kind of we will say a network. It could be a gate network or a computation network. Combine those ciphertexts together plus intermediate results maybe of other computation together, glue them, and return a ciphertext. So it's like completely magic. The picture is quite complicated because if you begin to look at the scheme that exists, you will find out that there are somewhat homomorphic encryption schemes, leveled homomorphic encryption schemes, and really fully homomorphic encryption schemes. So basically, somewhat homomorphic encryption schemes do not necessarily support all type of computation circuits. So they allow you to do some kind of useful circuits, but they have some drawbacks, like the size of ciphertext might grow with each computation, which is not a very desirable property. Leveled homomorphic encryption schemes are still a bit more useful because typically they will support all kind of circuits, but until a depth that is fixed. And what is quite useful is that the ciphertext size does not depend on D. So it means that you could imagine compute a lot of more useful stuff with your ciphertext, but you are still restricted. And a real fully homomorphic encryption scheme will support all kind of circuits, even the largest one or the more the one having the most depth. And the ciphertext size does not depend on that circuit depth. So this is basically the breakthrough of Craig Gentry was to start from that and to transform a somewhat homomorphic encryption scheme to a fully homomorphic encryption scheme using a procedure that is called bootstrapping. So what is bootstrapping? In a few words, so in most fully homomorphic encryption scheme, you are going to deal with noise, with noisy ciphertext. What does that mean? Actually, it's due to the fact that the hard problems. So you know that RSA is based on the factorization or extraction of modular roots modulo n. Maybe Diffie-Hellman elliptic curve-based cryptography based on the discrete logarithm. Those are hard mathematical programs for which we don't know efficient algorithm to solve, unless you have a quantum computer, of course, for those ones. There are other types of hard problems like ring learning with errors or lattice-based cryptography that, by the way, and it is a side note, have better resistance with respect to quantum computers. That allow you to build cryptography, and those fully homomorphic encryption schemes are based on this kind of hard problems. So typically, just to give you a flavor, how does it sound? Ring learning with errors, you are going to work with polynomial, having coefficient modulo a prime number, and reducing them modulo an irreducible polynomial. So basically, you are going to work with polynomial, multiply polynomials like you are used to do at school, or some of my former students or today's students are doing at school still. And basically, the problem is the following. You have an input data that is a polynomial here. You multiply it using a secret polynomial, and you add some noise to the result. And then you give basically you give the results to the adversary plus the first polynomial a of x, and the goal is to recover the secret polynomial here. But what is important is that noise component here. So it means that basically ciphertexts are noisy. So it means that if you mix together ciphertexts, the noise level will increase. Okay? And at a certain point, too noisy ciphertext will just become impossible to be decrypted in a correct way. So you are really dealing with noise here. And Gentry breakthrough was to start, so as I said before, from a somewhat homomorphic encryption scheme and make it bootstrappable, which means that making it able to remove, so to implement its own decryption operation homomorphically, so to remove the noise from one operation, plus being able to do one additional gate. In that case, you can, what you can do using the scheme is to compute on ciphertext, remove in a secure way the internal noise of the first operation, plus computing one more gate that will be the useful gate. And this is called, in a nutshell, bootstrapping. So, okay. It's much more complicated than that, but this is how it works. So what is very interesting is that relatively quickly people have been interested in implementing those beasts. So first in 2009, they were not speaking about ciphertext size or key size or computation time, but quite quickly, first implementation have occurred, and today, and have been published as open source software, which is kind of a very interesting phenomenon because people have been able to play with the code. Probably they have been encouraged to work on that subject as well, but not only with a theoretical focus, but also with a practical focus. And today we have a few examples of open source libraries that have been written by, so here typically we have IBM software and the IBM research software and Microsoft software, the HELib and SEAL libraries that you can download, you can compile, and you can work with them. So HELib is more putting forward by being a kind of toolbox for researchers working on homomorphic encryption. So it's more, I would say, probably more research oriented. But the SEAL library, it's advocated by Microsoft as being a bit more production ready. For instance, they have provided bindings for different programming languages, so they have done a good job at at putting forward this library. Another example, and it is one of the most efficient today, as I have understood, is TTFHE, which has been written by French, Bulgarian, Swiss-located researchers. So Nicola Gamma and I don't know her first name anymore. Georgieva, just working for Infer, that is a startup about 20 kilometers here from here. This is located at TPFL. And so it's rely on different mathematical structure. So it's working on the torus, on the real torus. So there is a lot of highly involved mathematics behind it. And I have sometimes to do a real demo. So I'm going to show you because they gave source code. So what they have implemented here is a secure an homomorphic comparator. So we are going to have two 16-bit numbers, which will be 2017 and 42, and we are going to implement a comparison of those two integer and outputting the smallest of the two, which means that the answer will be 42. I don't cheat. And the comparison and smallest element extraction will be implemented using approximately a bit less than 100 Boolean gates, but completely homomorphically. It means that we will have three components. Alice, that is going to produce generate a key and encrypt those two numbers. Then we will have a cloud component that is going to take the two ciphertext and combining them and returning an encrypted output, and then we'll have a kind of Alice BIS or verification step that will decrypt the ciphertext and show the proper result. So it's small code. So first, we are going to generate a random key using a secure random seed. You see, never trust cryptographer to write cryptographic software. It's a demo stuff. So. Then we are going to encrypt the two times the 16 bits of those two numbers, 2017 and 42. So we are going to work at bit level. So it means that we are working to work on the ciphertext at bit level, and we are just saving the secret key, the cloud key, which is the evaluation key I mentioned before, and the cloud data, which is the ciphertext, the two ciphertexts concatenated together. Here, and then so the cloud is going to, so we have a fairly high level API allowing to work on encrypted bits. So we are going to use MUX gates, so hardware designer know what it is, and XNOR gates here, and basically to compare those bits and to extract the smallest one. So fairly a bit of code here, and then using the verification, just taking the secret key, the decryption key, the answer data, which is the encrypted ciphertext, and decrypt it. And actually what is very impressive is that it compiles and it works. So Alice is working, generating his secret key material and the encrypted ciphertext, so we can have a look at how does it look. So what is interesting is that we have the cloud data here. So you remember it's 2 times 16-bit encrypted. So we get approximately 64 kilobytes of data. So it means that we have an expansion factor here of 32 to 64,000. So let's say 3 orders of magnitude for the ciphertext. Yeah, okay. This is a lot, but at the same time, 64 kilobytes, it's not that impressive for today's computer. What is a bit more impressive is the key material. So the secret key is a bit less than 80 megabytes. So a new time you will see 80 megabytes for a key. That's crazy. Of course, if you would like to embed that key into a mobile phone, then your engineering team will say, hey, come on, guy, come back later with a smaller key. But putting a key of 80 megabytes in a cloud instance, a new time, it's not that impressive. When at the very beginning we were speaking about ciphertext and keys of several gigabytes or even thousands of gigabytes, here you see that it's still huge, but it's more manageable in practice. So now we are going to run the cloud operation. So now you will have a flavor of how much time it takes. So it reports about 2.4 seconds for a bit less than 100 Boolean gates. Okay, 2 seconds of cryptographic operation. You can do a lot of things in 2 seconds. And you time it's a lot. But it means that the cost of evaluating homomorphically Boolean gates, it's approximately, I would say, 500ths of a second. So, okay, it's not microseconds, it's milliseconds, but still it gives you a very small sense of practical stuff. We can discuss about that for sure. And then we have gotten an encrypted ciphertext, which is cloud data. No, it's answer data here, which is 32 kilobytes. So it's one 16-bit integer encrypted. We still have this 2000 size increase, and then we can decrypt we can decrypt the result, and magically the result is 42, of course. And you have to trust me, or to trust them, no, but it works. I hope you remember what the question. So it means that it's not completely practical for sure, but it's not theoretical only. We are somewhere in between zone here. Okay, so that was all for the demo. Thank you, Infer. Ooh. I should go a bit faster. So, let's speak a bit about multi-party computation. So here, before we had a trust setup where I trust myself, of course, and I have another cloud provider that I cannot trust. Here, it's a kind of generalization of that trust model. Multi-party computation say we have many people or many agents here into the room, and nobody trusts anybody. So that's very easy to do business or computation together. Nobody can trust or is supposed to trust anybody. Let's take a scenario. A group of people would like to compute their average salary. So of course nobody would like to disclose his or her own salary. So how does it work? So it is the question addressed by multi-party computation is it possible to compute the sum of salaries? Then we can do the division after. It's okay. Only this information, so without disclosing any inputs of the computation in a secure way. This is a variant of this problem is also known by which is called Yao millionaire's problem. Alice and Maud would like to know who is the richer of the two, however, without disclosing their own wealth. And they need a kind of secure computation to securely compute this comparison. So the first possibility is to take a trusted party. So you take a trusted party, everybody disclose his wealth or salary, and the guy gives the results. The problem is that you have a trusted party in the setup. Another possibility is to do a kind of very bandwidth-consuming protocol. A first solution, which is not that secure, but that could work in certain setup, would be as follows. The first one, first people generate a random number and encrypt its own wealth using that random number. So it's just a one-time pod operation, and gives the ciphertext to the second one that adds his salary or his wealth, etc., etc., etc. And then when the added blinded version amount is come back to the first guy, he knows the random value that was secret and can remove it and output the result. So this works well if you can corrupt or a single party here, because basically what you see is something that is one-time pad encrypted. Of course, in that setting, if you corrupt two parties, troubles begin, and you can infer information that should not be disclosed. But this is the kind of setup of multi-party computation, and one of the properties that there will be a lot of communication. In multi-party computation, you will have protocols that are really heavily bandwidth demanding. And the idea is really to compute a non-function on secret inputs with people that do not trust each other. And the security should be kept even in some parties collude together, or if an adversary is able to corrupt many nodes. And we can think about different security models. So, of course, depending on the capacities of your bad guys. But more importantly is the semi-honest versus malicious or active adversary. So a lot of protocols are secure in the semi-honest setting. What does that mean? It's either you are honest or you are not. No, here in cryptography, we allow people to be semi-honest. We trust them to run the protocol as advocated, so we don't deviate from the protocol, but they are curious. They would like to maybe gather some information by looking at the data exchange and so on. So this is the semi-honest model. Okay, I don't have time. One of the examples are Yao garbled secrets, basically, which is an instance of two-party. The people would, for instance, implement in the millionaire problem solution. Where basically how does it work? Alice is going to encrypt the secrets, so the evaluation secret, and send it to Bob together with the encrypted inputs. And Bob will receive its own encrypted inputs thanks to Alice. So it looks like to be completely weird, meaning how can Bob trust Alice to encrypt his own secret inputs? Actually, there is some crypto magic here, and its name Oblivious Transfer. So unfortunately, I don't have time to go there, but we know how, and the protocol here based on RSA is in the side. But we know how to do that kind of very strange stuff. If Alice has two strings M0 and M1, Bob generates a random secret bit taking, okay, if it's 0, I would like to have M0. If it's M1, I would like to have M1. And ask Alice to send MI in such a way that she does not learn anything about the bit. So she sent something, but she does not know which value she sent. And Bob does not learn anything about the other secret value of Alice. And this is Oblivious Transfer, and it's a very, fundamental bricks of all those kind of multi-party computations. So I just would like to show you the result of a practical paper. Those guys have implemented the evaluation of an AES encryption circuit, which is already a kind of involved Boolean operation, so it has tens of thousands of gates, and they have implemented it in a different setting, in a LAN or worldwide. So typically worldwide is between 8 here and 14 different cities over the globe, and they were able to implement, using multi-party computation, an AES evaluation, using approximately 100, so those are milliseconds, so it's a bit less than 3 minutes of computations involving the communication between all the nodes over the planet. So it means that you can compute something secret, like an AES encryption, with untrusted party, so by distributing the key between different, here it's 128 nodes, without having that key in clear on a single node, with 8 minutes. But most of the time is most of the time it's invested in communication and not in computation here, because it's how multi-party computation works. Very rapidly, because I will be kicked off the scene. There are two examples of multi-party computation that are today in production that maybe you are using, or one of them every day, if you are using the Chrome browser, because they implement a form of simplest or simpler two-party computation protocol, which is called private set intersection. So basically, the idea is to compute security in a secure way the following operation. Alice has a database with secret items in it. Bob has a database with secret items the same, and they would like, or Alice would like to compute the intersection of the two sets here, such that she does not learn any information outside the intersection, so she does not have access to the database of Bob. She just gets the intersection, and Bob learns nothing about the database of Alice. So this is called private set intersection. There are many variants of them. For instance, Bob can learn the intersection as well, or instead of having the full intersection, we could compute a function of that intersection. And actually, this kind of protocol can be used to do, for instance, pattern matching, like testing human genomes. You have an encrypted human genome. You would like to know whether a certain gene is present in the database. You don't have access to the whole genome. You just get basically the precise gene or genes instead of having access to everything. You could imagine having the intersection of two confidential contact lists. This is a very practical scenario. Or suspect lists between security agencies, for instance. Or, for instance, compromised credential lists. And this is where one of the implementation has been done by Google. Or you can also imagine doing finding application in online advertising stuff. I will skip that one. But just to mention that this summer, Google has published an extension to the Chrome browser that allows to check a credential that you are entering into a website, to check that this credential, basically your login and password, are not in a database of compromised passwords. But this triggers very privacy-related issues, because are you really willing to send your username, password in clear to Google, such that they can check in clear in the database whether it is in compromise? No. Everything is encrypted, and the protocol basically is using private set intersection, allows to send credentials that are encrypted within the browser to Google, that has encrypted database of leaked credentials, to have an intersection of that in a secure way, such that Google does not learn anything. And this is one of the first large-scale application of private set intersection that I am aware of. So, to conclude, advanced cryptography or this kind of protocols allows to really mitigate the trust issue. Still, the performances are somewhat not that practical, too practical in very specific scenarios, but maybe in 10 years the picture will be much better than that. And the security, it's YOLO. No, you just have to trust the math. Okay, it's in theory, of course, because we still have the cryptography community still have to do a lot of work on the underlying hard problems in certain settings. Most of those protocols are secure in a honest but curious setting, which is not a setting where everybody is bad and try to actively attack the protocols. So, it is not completely optimal and basically we don't have any view on the security of implementations. Most likely, secure node, a node computing secure multi-party computation will is likely to have issues related to timing attacks or any kind of leakage attacks. So this is still an open problem. But my goal was really to show you that, look, those very theoretical, very impractical crypto today is arrive in a gray zone where people really begin to use it for useful purposes. We have startups that begin to work on that. So this is something that is really happening now. And thank you. Not such in a hurry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pascal. You made things so clear in almost the time that we had to do it. Maybe we have time to take one question before we go for lunch, okay?
So I understand that this kind of encryption addresses the confidentiality problem, but what about authenticating the operations that were performed on the numbers, for instance?
That's typically the point, my last point, where I say that those kind of protocol are secure in the honest but curious setting. So they address a lot of the confidentiality, but not all security problems. And so to have really, I would say, a good security, you will have to strive for active security. And active security means that your adversary is allowed to do anything he wants about, by, for instance, dropping communication, modifying packets and stuff like that. And this requires a lot of more cryptography that ensure active security, which costs a lot of CPU time and stuff like that. So there are we know how to have protocols that are secure with respect to active adversaries, but they are of course less efficient than the one that in the honest but curious setting. Yeah. So for sure, most, if not of Maltalk, was really dedicated to confidentiality, but confidentiality is not the only property that you have to achieve to have a secure system. Definitely. Fully agree.
Okay, thanks again, Pascal. Lunchtime, just follow the crowd and see you there.